Hello and welcome. Today I'm going to show you how to make a pumpkin spice latte at home. Alright, so what you're going to need to make this delicious concoction is really straightforward. Of course you're going to need the coffee and you're going to need the milk. Now, as far as milk goes, I always recommend when you're making a latte, when you're making any kind of coffee drink with milk, if you're using animal milk, get whole milk. Get full fat milk, because the more fat that's in there, the better the whole drink is going to taste. Some options that you can go with if you're not into animal milk is almond milk is a pretty good choice. But if you're going to use animal milk, don't use skim milk. Use milk with fat in it. You want the fat because that's going to combine really well with coffee. In addition to that, you'll need pumpkin puree. Now in this video example today, I'm using canned pumpkin puree. Canned puree is totally fine. I personally, I like a really good pumpkin pie, and during the holidays I'll often make that from scratch. So I'll get some sugar pie pumpkins. If you want to make it all completely from scratch, you can go ahead and do that and make your own pumpkin puree. Just make sure that you're using sugar pie pumpkins to do that. After that, you're going to need some kind of sweetener. I use sugar in this video, and you're also going to need pumpkin pie spice and vanilla extract. I'll mention it at the end, but you can use alternatives to the sugar. You can of course try this with no sugar, and it'll make a much, the amount of sugar that you use of course will determine how sweet the whole thing is, but a lot of these components have some natural interesting sweetness and flavors to them, so you can try without the sugar. I personally like adding a little bit. In this video I'm going to be using 2 tablespoons of sugar, and I'm going to link to this recipe below. The whole recipe will be on the page. And that is it. Oh, also some whipped cream, just if you like to top your pumpkin spice latte with a bit of whipped cream, but it's pretty straightforward. The key part to the whole process is heating the milk and combining all the ingredients in the proper way. So that's what I'm going to show you. We're going to cut over to that now. And I'm going to heat up the milk, combining the pumpkin puree, the sugar, and then ultimately as well the vanilla extract, the pumpkin pie spice, and the coffee. And we're going to make a pumpkin spice latte at home. Super easy. Let's check it out. All right, so the most involved part in creating the pumpkin spice latte at home is preparing the milk mixture. I've already gathered everything I need. Now, this is a giant thing of pumpkin puree. I had a large can. You don't need this much pumpkin puree, but you do need some pumpkin puree. I've already measured out 2 cups of milk into the saucepan here, and I'm just going to turn that on a medium heat. Let that start heating up. You're also going to want sugar. I measured out 2 tablespoons of sugar. You could go 1 to 3 or whatever you like. There's also some other things you can do. I'll talk about that again in the section afterwards. This is just for this specific recipe. You're going to want some pumpkin pie spice. I actually just went ahead and got pumpkin pie spice. You can mix it together using the ingredients of cinnamon, ginger, nutmeg, allspice. But this does just fine to me. So pumpkin pie spice and then vanilla. We of course will be using coffee at the end of this, and I'll get to that when the time comes. But for now, this is about making the pumpkin spice milk mixture. And we're going to be doing all that at once. So like I said, I got 2 cups of milk in here, and I've just got this low to medium heat just to start that heating up. And what we're going to do is we're going to be adding 2 tablespoons of pumpkin puree. I just did this from a can. If you want to go all out and make pumpkin puree yourself, make sure you get sugar pie pumpkins. Mildly imprecise with this because whatever, it's cooking. Just dive in. So really the beginning is just, we got the pumpkin puree and then we add our sugar as well. And now we need to heat this up. The key to doing this, and this is the case whenever you're heating up milk, whether you're doing it for coffee or you're making hot cocoa or anything like that, we want to make sure that we don't burn the milk because it can get nasty. What we're going to do, and I'm hoping the camera's going to pick it up, is that we're just going to heat this up until we start seeing some vapor coming off of the milk. So until the milk just starts steaming, and then we're going to take it off and it's going to be done. We don't want to go too far beyond that, but we do want to give it a chance to heat up and get all of the sugar and all of the pumpkin here as integrated as possible. And you'll see I'm using a whisk, very useful for this kind of thing. It's really that this is probably the most important thing in the entire drink is getting the milk heated properly and getting the pumpkin and the sugar all smooth. I've whisked that up a little bit. Now I'm just gonna let it heat for a moment. While this is heating up, I'm gonna talk a little bit about the coffee. In this demonstration, I'm just going to use straight up brewed coffee. This is not a concentrated coffee. You can do this with a brewed coffee. So what I brewed this on is actually an auto drip machine. So it's brewing a basic drip or pour over brew ratio, which gives me a drink that's drinkable on its own. I add this milk pumpkin spice mixture to this. This is probably gonna be a little on the not too rich side, just because there's a fair amount of water in here, just because of the brew. I picked a coffee that will translate well in terms of flavor. Now, some other options that I could do. I could make an espresso. If you have the tools to make that, you could use a stovetop mocha pot to make an espresso, or it's more of a concentrated coffee brew. You could use an AeroPress. You could also, if you don't have any of those, you just have an auto drip machine and you want to do this, you could brew at a more concentrated level, and the way you would do that is either add more coffee or use less water. The problem with doing it that way is that you're not technically brewing the coffee properly, so it's not going to taste as good as if you did a more proper concentrated brew, like an espresso, like a mocha pot, like something off of an AeroPress. So like I said, this is making 2 drinks. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to fill this entirely up with coffee, and at the end, we're going to combine everything in here. So a point on milk. Whenever I'm using milk in coffee, I always use whole milk. If you can't or don't want to do actual milk, if you want to use something like almond milk or something like that, that's totally fine, I get that. But if you're going to use cow milk or any kind of animal-based milk, you want to get the fattiest milk that you can, just because that's going to work so much better with your coffee than something like skim milk. All right, here we go. So I'm starting to see wisps of steam come off. I don't know if that's actually showing up in the video, but yeah, the milk's pretty hot. Tastes like pumpkin spice. All right. So at this point, we want to take the milk off of the heat. And now we're going to add our vanilla, our pumpkin spice, and our coffee, and we're going to combine everything together. So the recipe that I have that I'm using calls for half a cup of concentrated coffee. I've got a full cup of coffee here because mine is not concentrated, and that'll turn out fine. Like I said before, if I had another way of preparing the coffee, that would be good. Cold brew would also be a good method of doing this, although you would want to heat up the cold brew first so you're not adding cold coffee to this. So in goes the vanilla, and now we're going to add half a teaspoon of pumpkin pie spice. There we go. Pumpkin pie spice. We're going to sprinkle some more on the coffee later. And then our coffee. Now you want to get that all mixed up. So that is, well, that's a pumpkin spice latte. So as not to make a giant mess, I'm going to ladle this in here. And I'm leaving a little bit of room at the top because I want to add whipped cream. All right, so here we go. We have our pumpkin spice latte. That is quite decadent. Now, there's some points I wanted to talk about. So first off, excuse me one second. It's really good pumpkin spice latte. So first off, I don't think I could show you the steam wisps that were coming off the milk. I was trying to show that to you on the video, but I'm not sure it came across. That is how you know when to stop, when to take the milk off the heat. The whole time I was heating, of course, I was keeping things stirred as well, but I was waiting for the moment when I started to see wisps of steam coming off the milk, and that's when you take it off the heat. And then you add your vanilla extract, your pumpkin pie spice, and your coffee. The rest of that is pretty straightforward. You saw it's pumpkin puree, it's sugar, it's the vanilla extract, it's pumpkin pie spice, it's the milk. You can use a couple other things in the recipe like this. So you can of course use whatever sweetener that you want. You saw me use sugar there. That works just fine, of course. You could also use maple syrup if you want to give your pumpkin spice latte a little bit of a maple edge. That can also take the place of the vanilla extract if you need to. It's just something that you can kind of play around with to give yourself a different sort of experience. It's not going to be exactly the same, but the key to the drink is just making sure you heat up the milk properly. If you burn the milk, it's going to come out not very pleasant. You saw me in the video using just straight up brewed coffee, and that works fine. It actually tastes really good. I was a little concerned that because of the water content in the coffee, this would end up really weird, but works quite well. I used a sort of medium roasted Honduran coffee that has a lot of good chocolatey and nuttiness to it, so that kind of richness translates well through milk. I would not want to use a light roasted coffee doing something like this. In terms of the strength of the coffee itself, in terms of how it's brewed, when you're making a latte at home, like traditional latte in a cafe, they're going to be using espresso. And espresso plus milk is a perfect combination because espresso has a lot of really strong flavor, it has a lot of oils, it translates really well through milk. When you're doing brewed coffee, especially paper filter brewed coffee, there's a lot of strength that does not translate with the milk. So it can be a little tricky. And you might be inclined to do a more concentrated brew of your coffee. And that can work. That can help to make the coffee flavor come out more in the milk. But the problem with that is you will be using a coffee that is not brewed as well as it could be. It's not brewed properly. The easiest and cheapest answer to that, there are actually two solutions. If you want to be making drinks like this regularly, and your usual brew method is like an auto drip machine or some kind of pour over, any kind of paper filter method, and you want to be making like lattes, this kind of stuff, especially through the holidays, you might seriously consider getting yourself a mocha pot. Mocha pot on the stove is going to make a pressurized coffee, and it's kind of an espresso. I can't remember exactly how much pressure a mocha pot actually uses. It's nowhere near an actual espresso machine, but you can make a really nice concentrated coffee that will work superbly well in milk. And that's a coffee that is brewed well. You brew it, you don't need to make a concentrated mocha pot coffee. You just brew the mocha pot the way it is, and then you would use that coffee instead of this coffee. And then you could use the amount in the recipe. So this recipe, the way I made it, calls for half a cup of coffee. I would use a half a cup of mocha pot in something like this. If I was using actual espresso, I would probably, for the amount that we made there, I would certainly use at least 2 shots of espresso, maybe 4. I'd probably play around with it and see the result that I kind of like. So a mocha pot is a really good solution for that. You could also use an AeroPress. An AeroPress will allow you to make a more concentrated coffee that's brewed properly, and it's the pressure used in the AeroPress that allows you to get a proper extraction at a concentrated level. So that's a really useful tool, also quite affordable. I'm going to link both of those below the video. Another solution, if you're brewing at home, is to brew a French press. You could, of course, brew it concentrated, but you might try brewing it regularly. And the reason I mentioned the French press is because it's fully immersive, so you're going to be getting a lot more oils in your coffee in the French press, and that'll translate well with the milk. So the French press is a really good option for this kind of thing. You can, of course, brew a more concentrated French press and play around with those and see what kind of drink you like. Regardless of what you do with the coffee, the rest of the process is the same. So that has been making your own pumpkin spice latte at home from scratch. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions, please do ask in the video below. I'm sure there are a lot of things that I haven't thought of. Making this kind of thing, I think, can be really easy to dive in and straightforward, but then can get quite complex. One thing I might mention is in terms of the coffee that you buy. I mentioned the coffee that I used here was a medium roasted coffee from Honduras, and it had really nice nutty and chocolatey flavors that kind of do well in milk. In terms of regions to look for, I would consider Central America as a really good place to, in terms of origins of coffee. Indonesia. Those kind of coffees have a lot of deeper flavors. They can have a lot of body, that sort of thing. You also might consider going for a darker roast. And the reason for that is the darker the coffee is roasted, the more the sugars are caramelized, the more oils are going to end up in the coffee. And that kind of thing just translates well in milk. I'm personally not a huge fan of dark roasts, but I usually drink coffee just by itself. The reason dark roasts are so prevalent is because of the latte. Because when you combine coffee and milk, it's much easier to taste the coffee through the milk if the coffee is roasted darker. And that's just kind of a blanket catch-all. So if you're making this and you're not entirely satisfied with how the coffee tastes with everything mixed together, then an easy way to kind of hack a stronger, a more noticeable coffee taste in your latte is to just go with a darker roasted coffee. And it might take some experimenting to find a really good option. I'm gonna link below to a dark roasted coffee that I really enjoy. And I kind of wish I had some to make with this, but I don't have any right now. And that's a coffee roasted by Conduit Coffee, and we sell it on the Coffee Lovers shop. So I'll link to that in the below the video on the article page, wherever you may be watching this. That's all from me today. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe, like the video, let me know your thoughts below, ask your questions, and let's make some more tasty drinks this holiday season.